The December air bit sharply against Liam Bennett's cheeks as he sat motionless on the Rotiron Park bench, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid evening. At 28, he commanded boardrooms with the confidence of someone twice his age. Yet tonight he felt like a lost child. His charcoal wool coat, tailored to perfection on Savile Row, hung heavy on his shoulders, a $3,000 shield against the cold that couldn't touch the emptiness inside. Around him, the city pulsed with Christmas magic. Families streamed past, clutching oversized shopping bags from Macy's and Bloomingdale's, their children's mittened hands wrapped around steaming cups of hot chocolate that sent wisps of cinnamon-scented steam into the night air. A mother laughed as her toddler pointed excitedly at the towering Christmas tree across the street, its thousands of LED lights casting dancing shadows on the snow-dusted sidewalk. Liam pulled his phone from his coat pocket, the screen illuminating 17 missed calls from his assistant. The Bennett family's annual Christmas gala was in full swing at their Fifth Avenue penthouse. Politicians, celebrities, and business magnates, sipping champagne worth more than most people's monthly rent. He'd RSVP'd 6 months ago, unable to face another evening of hollow congratulations and calculated conversations. The irony wasn't lost on him. Bennett Industries had just closed its most profitable quarter in company history. His photograph graced the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The Golden Boy of Tech." Yet success tasted like ash in his mouth, and every achievement felt like another bar in an increasingly elaborate cage. A gust of wind scattered snowflakes across his Italian leather shoes, each one melting instantly against the polished surface. He closed his eyes and let the sounds of the city wash over him, car horns honking in the distance, the cheerful jingle of Salvation Army bells, couples whispering sweet nothings as they hurried to romantic dinners. That's when he heard them soft footsteps approaching through the snow, tiny and deliberate against the concrete. He opened his eyes to find a little girl standing before him, and for a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with golden curls that caught the street light like spun silk, escaping from beneath a red wool coat that had seen better winters. The coat was clean but worn, its buttons mismatched as if they'd been replaced over time. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, and her bright blue eyes held a clarity that made Liam's chest tighten unexpectedly. In her small hands, she clutched a paper bag decorated with crayon drawings of snowmen and candy canes, her artwork. She studied him with the fearless curiosity that only children possess, tilting her head slightly as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Sir," she said, her voice crystal clear and startlingly confident, "do you want to have Christmas Eve dinner with me and my mommy?" The question hung in the frigid air between them. Liam opened his mouth to speak, to politely decline, to explain that he was a stranger, that her mother wouldn't approve, and that he had important things to do. But no words came. Before he could gather his thoughts, she stepped closer and reached out with her free hand, her small fingers wrapping around his much larger ones with surprising strength. Her mitten was knitted wool, soft and warm against his skin, and something about that simple contact, the trust, the innocence, the absolute certainty that he would follow and did something inside him. "Come on," she said, tugging gently. "Mommy's making chicken, and we have real candles tonight." Liam felt himself rising from the bench as if in a dream. His legs moved of their own accord, his expensive shoes finding purchase on the slippery sidewalk. The little girl's hand in his felt like an anchor, grounding him in a way that no business deal or board meeting ever had. They walked together down the bustling avenue, an unlikely pair that drew curious glances from passersby. A businessman, in a $1,000 coat, being led by a child in a second-hand coat, was a tableau that spoke to something deeper than surface appearances. Some people smiled at the sight, others whispered among themselves, but Liam found he didn't care. About the stairs for the first time in years. As they walked, the little girl chattered easily, pointing out Christmas decorations in shop windows and describing the snowman she'd built that morning. "His name is Mr. Buttons," she explained seriously, "because Mommy gave me old buttons for his coat. He's not very big, but he's got a nice smile." Liam found himself smiling despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. When was the last time someone had spoken to him without wanting something in return? When was the last time a conversation was about snowmen instead of stock prices? They turned onto a side street lined with modest apartment buildings, their facades, worn but dignified. Golden light spilled from windows, and Liam could see glimpses of family life, a man helping his son with homework at a kitchen table, a woman hanging Christmas stockings on a mantelpiece, an elderly couple sharing tea while watching the evening news. The little girl stopped in front of a 40-story brick building, whose facade was decorated with a single pine wreath and a strand of multicolored lights that blinked in a cheerful sequence. Some of the bulbs had burned out, creating gaps in the pattern, but the overall effect was warm and welcoming. "Right here, sir," she announced proudly, bouncing on her toes. "This is where we live. We're on the 4th floor, and we have the best view of the snow." Before Liam could respond, the heavy wooden door swung open. A young woman appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the soft yellow light of the hallway. She was perhaps 25, with golden hair the same shade as her daughter's, though hers was swept back in a practical braid that had come slightly undone. Her eyes, a deep blue that reminded Liam of winter skies, moved from her daughter to him with a mixture of surprise and maternal caution. She wore a simple sweater in forest green, its sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and dark jeans that had faded at the knees. In her hands, she clutched a kitchen towel, and Liam could smell the warm scents of roasted chicken and herbs drifting from the apartment behind her. "Sophie," she said, her voice gentle but questioning. "Who's your friend?" Sophie beamed up at both of them, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, this is the man I told you about. He was sitting all alone in the snow, and he looked so sad. So I asked him to come have dinner with us, just like you said we should always help people who need help." The woman's gaze moved to Liam, and he felt exposed under her scrutiny. There was no fear in her expression, but there was careful mother's instinct to protect her child, warring with what appeared to be a natural inclination toward kindness. Liam cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how this must look, a well-dressed stranger being dragged home by a to hope it's not too much trouble, he managed, his voice rougher than usual. "I tried to explain to Sophie that I'm a stranger, but she was quite insistent." The woman studied him for another moment, taking in his expensive clothes, his uncertain posture, the way he held himself like someone unaccustomed to being in situations he couldn't control. Then her expression softened slightly. "Sophie has a gift for finding people who need looking after," she said quietly. "My name is Anna Hayes, and you are, Liam Bennett." He paused, then added, "I can go if this is inappropriate. I don't want to impose on your evening." Anna glanced down at Sophie, who was still clutching Liam's hand and looking up at her mother with hopeful eyes. The little girl had made up her mind about their guest, and Anna seemed to be weighing something. In her mind, Sophie's usually a good judge of character, Anna said finally, stepping aside. "Come in, but I should warn you dinner's nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and vegetables." The relief that flooded through Liam was unexpected and overwhelming. He followed them into the building, his footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. The walls were painted a warm cream color, and the handrail was worn smooth by countless hands. Family photographs and children's artwork decorated the hallway, creating a gallery of domestic life that felt foreign to Liam's experience. As they climbed the 4 flights of stairs, Sophie continued her cheerful chatter, telling Liam about her neighbors Mrs. Rodriguez, who always smelled like cinnamon, Mr. Che-en, who let her help water his plants, and the Murphy twins in Eswo were exactly her age and liked to play dress-up. "Here we are," Anna said, producing a key from her pocket and unlocking a door painted cheerful blue. "Home sweet home." The apartment was small, what real estate agents would generously call cozy, but it radiated a warmth that had nothing to do with the radiator humming softly in the corner. The living room and kitchen occupied a single space, with a worn but comfortable couch positioned to face both the tiny television and the kitchen table by the window. The walls were painted, a soft yellow that made everything feel sunny even on this gray December evening. Sophie's artwork covered every available surface, crayon drawings of rainbows and butterflies, handprint turkeys from Thanksgiving, and paper snowflakes cut with childish enthusiasm. A small bookshelf held a collection of well-loved children's books, their spines cracked from countless readings. In the corner stood a 3-foot artificial Christmas tree, its branches slightly bent but decorated with obvious care. Paper ornaments cut from construction paper hung alongside dollar store baubles, and a star made from aluminum foil and gold crayon adorned the top. Beneath it, a handful of wrapped presents, weighted small packages wrapped in brown paper and tied with red ribbon, but it was the kitchen table that drew Liam's attention. Set for 2 with mismatched plates, 1 blue ceramic, 1 white porcelain with tiny flowers. It represented something he'd never experienced, a meal prepared with love rather than duty. A single white candle flickered in the center, casting dancing shadows on the chipped wood surface. "Sophie, wash your hands," Anna instructed, hanging her kitchen towel on a hook by the sink, "and show Mr. Bennett where the bathroom is." "It's just Liam," he said softly, surprising himself. He rarely invited informality from anyone, but something about this place stripped away his usual formality. Anna smiled, a real smile, not the practiced politeness he encountered in boardrooms. "Just Liam, then. Sophie, show Liam where he can freshen up." As Sophie led him down a narrow hallway lined with more of her artwork, Liam caught glimpses of the rest of the apartment. Anna's bedroom was visible through a partially open door, a double bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser topped with a few framed photographs, and a window overlooking the fire escape. Sophie's room was an explosion of pink and purple, with stuffed animals arranged carefully on her bed and a child-sized table, where she worked on her art projects. The bathroom was tiny but spotless, with a shower curtain decorated with rubber ducks and a small step stool so Sophie could reach the sink. Liam washed his hands with soap that smelled like lavender and studied his reflection in the mirror above the sink. He looked exactly like what he was, a wealthy man in an expensive suit, completely out of place in this humble apartment. Yet something in his eyes was different. The cold distance that usually characterized his expression had been replaced by something warmer, more uncertain, more human. When he returned to the main room, Anna was placing a 3rd plate on the table, this one white ceramic with a small chip on the rim. She'd also lit a second candle, and the increased light made the small space feel even more intimate. "Sit anywhere," Anna said, gesturing to the 3 chairs around the table. "Sophie, come help me serve." Liam chose the chair facing the window, where he could see the snow beginning to fall more heavily. The street below was quiet now. Most people had retreated indoors for the evening. Across the way, he could see into other apartments a family watching television together. A man reading a book while his cat slept on his lap. An elderly woman knitting in her rocking chair. Sophie appeared at his elbow, carrying a basket of dinner rolls, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "Mommy makes the best bread," she announced, setting the basket down carefully. She learned how from a book. Anna followed with a platter of roasted chicken, golden brown and fragrant with herbs. The sight of it made Liam's stomach growl. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a home-cooked meal. His usual dinner was either room service at his penthouse or expensive restaurants where the food was artfully arranged but left him feeling empty. "It's not much," Anna said, settling into her chair, "but it's warm and filling." "It looks wonderful," Liam said, and meant it. The chicken was accompanied by roasted vegetables that looked like they'd been carefully selected from a grocery store sale bin, but the aroma was incredible. "I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Surely, you have a housekeeper. Or a cook." Liam shook his head. "I have a housekeeper, but she just stocks the refrigerator. I mostly eat out or order in. I work late most nights, and cooking for one person seems..." He trailed off, realizing how pathetic that sounded. "Lonely," Anna finished quietly, and something in her tone made Liam look up sharply. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment he saw something in her expression that mirrored his isolation. But then Sophie broke the spell by climbing into her chair and clapping her hands together. "Can we say grace?" she asked, looking between the adults expectantly. Anna nodded, reaching for Sophie's hand, and then, after a moment's hesitation, for Liam's her fingers were warm and slightly rough from work, and Liam found himself holding on tighter than necessary. "Dear God," Sophie began in her clear, serious voice. "Thank you for the chicken and the vegetables, and the warm bread. Thank you to Mommy who works so hard, and thank you for bringing Liam to eat with us because nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve. Amen." "Amen," Anna echoed softly. Liam's throat tightened. "Amen," he whispered. They ate slowly, the conversation flowing naturally despite the unusual circumstances. Sophie chattered about her day at preschool, where they'd made paper angels and sung Christmas carols. Anna asked gentle questions about Liam's work, and he found himself explaining his company in terms a 4-year-old could understand. "So you make computer programs?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide with interest. "Sort of. I help other companies use computers to do their work better," Liam explained. "That sounds important," Sophie said solemnly. "Do you like it?" The question caught Liam off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him if he liked his work? "I used to," he said honestly. "It's complicated now." Anna was quiet through most of the meal, but Liam caught her watching him with thoughtful eyes. She had a way of listening that made him feel heard. Not just the words he spoke, but the ones he didn't say. The food was simple but delicious, seasoned with care, and served with love. Liam found himself taking seconds, then thirds, unable to remember feeling this satisfied after a meal. It wasn't just the food it was the company, the warmth, the sense of belonging that he'd been searching for without knowing it. As they finished eating, Sophie yawned widely, her eyelids growing heavy. "Can Liam help me with my puzzle?" she asked Anna. "If he wants to," Anna replied, beginning to clear the dishes. "I'd like that," Liam said, and realized he meant it. He'd never spent time with children before, and had no idea how to interact with them, but something about Sophie's innocent trust made him want to try. They moved to the living room, where Sophie had a 100-piece puzzle of a winter scene spread across the coffee table. As they worked together, searching for corner pieces and matching colors, Liam felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The outside world with its pressures and expectations and endless demands seemed very far away. Anna finished cleaning the kitchen and joined them on the couch, tucking Sophie against her side. The little girl's breathing had grown deep and regular, and her head nodded against her mother's shoulder. "She's had a big day," Anna said softly, stroking Sophie's hair. "Christmas Eve is always exciting for her." Liam watched them together, struck by the easy intimacy between mother and daughter. "She's remarkable," he said quietly. "I've never met a child quite like her." "She's my whole world," Anna replied, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Sometimes I worry that it's just the two of us, that she's missing out on having a bigger family. But then she does something like this, brings home a stranger because she thinks he needs help, and I realize she's going to be just fine." Words hung in the air between them, and Liam felt something shift in his chest. He looked around the small apartment at the handmade decorations, the carefully tended Christmas tree, the photographs of Anna and Sophie laughing together, understood that he was witnessing something precious and rare. This was what home looked like. Not the marble floors and designer furniture of his penthouse, but this. A place where love lived in every corner, where every object had a story, where meals were shared and laughter echoed, and people cared for each other simply because they chose to. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. For letting me stay. For including me. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Anna's smile was gentle and understanding. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we don't know we need until they're given to us. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in quiet beauty. Inside, around that small table with its flickering candles and mismatched plates, Liam felt something he'd thought was lost forever, the possibility of belonging. Sophie had been transferred to her bed, her small body curled beneath a quilt that Anna had made herself, patches of fabric in blues and greens and yellows. Stitched together with love and patience, the apartment felt different now, quieter but no less warm, with just the two adults sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. Anna had made tea, something floral and soothing from a box of discount tea bags, and poured it into mugs that didn't match but somehow looked right together. The candles had burned lower, their flames dancing in the slight draft from the old windows, casting shifting shadows across the walls. "Tell me about her," Liam said, wrapping his hands around his mug for warmth. "About Sophie." Anna's expression softened, the way it always did when she talked about her daughter. "She's been the light of my life since the day she was born. 4 years old and already so wise, so full of compassion. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how I got so lucky." "It can't have been easy," Liam said gently, raising her alone. Anna was quiet for a long moment, her finger tracing the rim of her mug. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that invited truth. "I was 21 when I got pregnant," she said finally. "I was in my junior year at NYU, studying elementary education. I had all these dreams about having my classroom, decorating it with paper stars, and inspiring children to love learning the way my third-grade teacher inspired me." She paused, taking a sip of tea. "I met him at a coffee shop near campus. David, he was older, 28, charming in that confident way that made me feel sophisticated for being with him. He had this way of talking about the future like it was something we'd build together." Liam waited, sensing there was more to the story. "When I told him I was pregnant, he said all the right things at first, that we'd figure it out together, that he'd support whatever decision I made. But then he started talking about how young we were, how much potential we both had, how a baby would change everything." Anna's voice grew quieter. 3 days later, he was gone. Just gone. His phone was disconnected, his apartment was empty, and I never saw him again. The pain in her voice was old but still sharp around the edges. Liam felt a surge of anger toward this man he'd never met, this coward who had abandoned the woman sitting across from him. "What did you do?" he asked. "I went to my parents," Anna said, her smile bitter. "They were disappointed. That's the word they used. They said I was throwing my life away, that I was too young to understand what I was choosing. When I told them I was keeping the baby, they said they couldn't support my decision, financially or emotionally." She set down her mug, her hands clasping together on the table. "I moved out 2 days later, dropped out of school, and got a job waiting tables at a diner in Queens. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was kind enough to let me work until I was 8 months pregnant, and she held my job for me after Sophie was born." "You raised her completely alone?" Liam asked, his voice filled with quiet amazement. Anna nodded. "I've waited tables, cleaned houses, answered phones, stocked shelves, whatever paid enough to keep us fed and housed. We've moved 6 times in 4 years, always chasing cheaper rent or better opportunities. But I never regretted keeping her, not once." There was no self-pity in her voice, no bitterness toward the hand life had dealt her, just the quiet strength of someone who had faced impossible choices and found a way to keep going. "Do you ever get angry?" Liam asked. "At him? At your parents? At the unfairness of it all?" Anna considered the question carefully. "Of course I do. Sometimes I lie awake at night, angry at David for leaving, angry at my parents for choosing their disappointment over their daughter, angry at myself for trusting people who ultimately let me down." She met his eyes. "But I learned something important early on. Anger eats more than it feeds. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't fix what's broken." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "My grandmother used to say there's no point in blaming the weather, you just find a better coat. So that's what I've done. I've found ways to stay warm." Liam stared at her, struck by the grace in her words. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter, who had been abandoned by the people who should have supported her most. Yet she had somehow found a way to build a life filled with love and hope. "What about you?" Anna asked gently. "You mentioned your family earlier. Are you close to them?" Liam let out a laugh that held no humor. "Close? No, I wouldn't say that. My family is wealthy private jets, charity galas, and buildings with our name on them, but we're not what you'd call close." He paused, surprised by his willingness to share. "My mother is a perfectionist who sees emotion as a weakness. I can't remember the last time she hugged me, probably when I was Sophie's age. My father built an empire, and he's spent my entire life trying to mold me into his successor. When I started my own company instead of taking over his, he saw it as a betrayal. That must have been difficult," Anna said quietly. "I told myself it didn't matter," Liam continued. "I threw myself into work, built my success, and proved I didn't need their approval. But the truth is, I've been angry for so long that I forgot how to be anything else. Until tonight. He looked around the small apartment, at the evidence of love in every corner. I've been sitting in my ivory tower, feeling sorry for myself because my parents don't know how to show love. But you, you've built something beautiful. Out of nothing, you've created a home full of warmth and joy, despite everything you've been through. Anna reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was gentle but firm, grounding him in the moment. Maybe your parents do love you, she said softly. Maybe they just never learned how to show it. That doesn't make it right, but it doesn't make it entirely their fault either. Her words hit him like a physical blow, not painful, but transformative. He'd spent so many years building walls around his heart, protecting himself from the disappointment of his parents' emotional distance. But Anna's simple observation that his parents might love him, but not know how to express it, cracked something open inside him. I've been so focused on what I wasn't getting from them, he said slowly, that I never considered what they might be struggling with themselves. Pain has a way of passing itself down through generations, Anna said, but so does love. Sometimes it just takes someone from outside to help us see it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the candles burning lower, the snow continuing to fall outside. Liam felt something loosening in his chest, years of resentment and loneliness, beginning to dissolve in the warm glow of candlelight and honest conversation. Can I ask you something? Anna said eventually. Anything. What were you doing on that park bench tonight? A man like you, successful, important, surely you had somewhere to be on Christmas Eve. Liam considered the question, wanting to give her an honest answer. I was running away, he said finally, from my family's expectations, from the emptiness of my life, from the realization that I'd built everything I thought I wanted, and it still wasn't enough. He met her eyes. I was thinking about how I'd managed to surround myself with everything, except the things that matter. Until Sophie found me, I was probably the loneliest person in the city, and now? Anna asked softly. Liam looked around the apartment at the sleeping child in the next room, at the woman across from him who had opened her home and her heart to a stranger, at the simple Christmas tree that somehow felt more magical than any elaborate display he'd ever seen. Now I feel like I might have found something I didn't even know I was looking for, he said quietly. Anna's smile was warm and understanding. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we don't see coming. Outside, the city slept under its blanket of snow. Inside, two people who had been strangers just hours before sat in the glow of flickering candles, sharing their stories and discovering that sometimes the most profound connections happen when we least expect them. The night was growing late, but neither of them seemed eager to break the spell of this unexpected Christmas Eve. They had found something precious in each other's company, not romance. Not yet, but something deeper, recognition, understanding, and the beginning of hope. Days that followed Christmas Eve passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt anything but ordinary to Liam. He found himself returning to fourth-floor apartment with increasing frequency, drawn by something he couldn't quite name but didn't want to examine too closely. At first, he told himself he was just checking on them, making sure Anna and Sophie were doing well, repaying their kindness with small gestures. He'd arrive with bags from the Italian bakery downtown, watching Sophie's eyes light up when she saw the cannoli and biscotti, or he'd bring books for Sophie's growing library. Carefully chosen picture books about friendship and adventure that she would insist on reading aloud to both adults. But as the weeks passed, his visits became less about repayment and more about necessity. The apartment had become his sanctuary, the one place in the city where he could breathe without feeling the weight of expectations pressing down on his shoulders. One gray January afternoon, Liam arrived to find Anna standing on a chair in the kitchen, trying to reach the flickering overhead light fixture. The bulb was dying, casting uneven shadows across the room, and she was struggling with the glass cover. Here, let me, he said, setting down the bag of groceries he'd brought and moving to steady the chair. I can manage, Anna protested, but she was already stepping down, accepting his help with the grace of someone who had learned to be grateful for assistance without feeling diminished by it. Liam climbed onto the chair, his expensive suit jacket discarded on the counter. As he worked to remove the old bulb, he was acutely aware of Anna standing close beside him, ready to hand him the replacement bulb when needed. You don't have to do this, Anna said quietly. I could have called the super. I know, Liam replied, focused on his task, but I want to. I'm not doing this to be polite or to assuage some guilt. I'm doing this because I want to be useful here. When the new bulb was installed and the kitchen was flooded with warm, steady light, Anna looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said simply. But there was something in her voice that made the words feel like more than gratitude. Their conversations grew longer and more intimate as the weeks passed. Sometimes they talked while Sophie played nearby, building elaborate towers from cereal boxes or creating detailed drawings of their family that always included Liam with his characteristically oversized smile. Other times, they would sit together after Sophie had gone to bed, sharing tea and stories in the gentle glow of the kitchen candles. Liam learned that Anna had been a voracious reader as a child, devouring everything from classic literature to scientific journals. She still read whenever she could steal a few minutes, usually after Sophie was asleep, using a small flashlight so she wouldn't wake her daughter. "What are you reading now?" he asked one evening, noticing a paperback novel on the kitchen counter. Anna smiled sheepishly. "It's silly. Just a romance novel I picked up at the library's book sale. 50 cents and predictable, but sometimes I need stories with guaranteed happy endings." "That's not silly," Liam said seriously. "We all need hope sometimes." In return, Liam found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone: his fear that success had made him incapable of genuine connection, his recurring dream of walking through his empty penthouse and hearing nothing but the echo of his footsteps, his growing certainty that he'd built his life on the wrong foundation entirely. "I have everything I thought I wanted," he told Anna. One evening as they sat on the couch, Sophie asleep between them, after insisting on a 3-person puzzle session. "But I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Like I'm playing a part in a play I never auditioned for." "So change the script," Anna said softly. "You're the protagonist of your own story. Liam, you get to decide how it goes." Her words stayed with him during the long nights in his penthouse, rattling around in his head like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. February arrived with a bitter cold snap that turned the city into a frozen landscape of gray slush and bare trees. Liam had been visiting Anna and Sophie for over a month now, and their small apartment had become more familiar to him than his own home. One evening, as he was helping Sophie with a particularly challenging puzzle 200-piece scene of a farm that she'd insisted was not too hard for me, Anna mentioned something that lodged itself in his memory like a splinter. "This weather makes me miss my old scarf," she said absently, folding a load of laundry that she'd brought up from the basement laundry room. "It was this beautiful cream-colored knit that my grandmother made for me before she died. I lost it on the subway last winter, and I still find myself reaching for it when I'm getting dressed." She laughed, shaking her head. "It's silly to miss a scarf, but it was the last thing I had of hers. She taught me to knit, tried to teach me to cook, always said I had good hands for making things." Liam looked up from the puzzle, studying Anna's face as she spoke. There was a wistfulness in her expression, a brief shadow of sadness that she quickly pushed away. "I'm sure she would have been proud of you," he said quietly, "of how you've built this life, how you're raising Sophie." Anna smiled, but the sadness lingered around her eyes. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder what she would think of all my choices, whether she would understand why I kept Sophie, why I've struggled so much instead of taking the easy way out." "There's nothing easy about raising a child alone," Liam said. "What you've done, what you continue to do, it's extraordinary." The moment passed, but the image of Anna's face stayed with him. Over the next few days, he found himself thinking about that lost scarf, about the grief in her voice when she mentioned her grandmother, about the way she'd described her grandmother's belief in her good hands. The following Saturday, instead of heading directly to Anna's apartment, as had become his routine, Liam found himself walking through the garment district, searching for something he couldn't quite articulate. He passed window after window of fabric shops and clothing stores, none of them quite right. Finally, in a small boutique tucked between a button shop and a vintage clothing store, he found it. A cream-colored scarf, hand-knit from impossibly soft wool with delicate cable patterns, that spoke of hours of careful work. It was exactly the kind of thing Anna's grandmother might have made practical but beautiful, simple but elegant. The shop owner, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. "This is a special piece," she said, her accent carrying hints of Eastern Europe. "My daughter made as she has, what do you call it? Good hands for making things." Liam's heart clenched at the familiar phrase. "It's perfect," he said quietly. That evening, he arrived at Anna's apartment carrying a small paper bag and wearing an expression that made Sophie immediately suspicious. "What's in the bag?" she demanded, abandoning her coloring book to investigate. "Sophie, let Liam come in before you start interrogating him," Anna said, laughing. But her eyes were curious, too, and Liam realized he was nervous.